Stacy Hunsucker stood in the kitchen of her new home in Mount Holly, North Carolina. Sunlight softly reflected off the polished surfaces, and her daughters played quietly in the living room. It seemed like a perfect life, but beneath this idyllic scene lurked an anxiety no one suspected. After the birth of her daughter, Stacy began experiencing mysterious health problems, and every joyful day of motherhood was overshadowed by pain. Her husband, Joshua Hansaker, appeared loving and devoted, but sometimes a strange shadow flickered in his eyes. No one could have predicted that behind that shadow lay a tragedy that would change their lives forever. At first glance, the life of Stacy Robinson seemed like a fairy tale. In school, she met a boy who was 7 years older than her. His name was Joshua Hunsucker, and he surrounded Stacy with a kind of love she had never even dreamed of. The couple dated for several years before getting married in 2010, when Stacy was 24 and Joshua was 31. Both were established professionals, well regarded by their employers. Joshua worked as a flight paramedic, and Stacy was a legal assistant and also taught children at a preschool affiliated with a church school. After the wedding, the newlyweds bought a house in Mount Holly, and in the same year, 2010, their daughter Piper Elizabeth Hunsucker, was born. But at this happiest moment in the young couple's life, Stacy began experiencing health problems that doctors could not explain. She struggled to breathe and suffered from a low heart rate and low blood pressure. Specialists ran test after test but could not determine what was happening to her. Eventually, they concluded that Stacy was among the women who experience complications after childbirth. In fact, about 20 to 25% of women experience thyroid problems after giving birth. To compensate for pregnancy, the thyroid gland enlarges, and after childbirth, it is supposed to return to its normal state. But sometimes it does not. Since the thyroid controls whether the heart beats faster, stronger, or slower, doctors do indeed observe symptoms in some women after childbirth similar to those that exhausted Stacy. Therefore, medical professionals concluded that Stacy's condition was caused by this. However, there is an important detail. 20 to 25% is a fairly large percentage, and it is hard to believe that none of the specialists treating Stacy thought to run the appropriate tests. In any case, while Stacy was battling her mysterious illness, another misfortune struck the family. In July 2013, their home caught fire, destroying most of their belongings and leaving the family in financial difficulty. Relatives and friends organized a fundraising campaign to help. As Stacy's medical bills continued to grow, their goal was to raise $20,000, and they managed to collect more than half of that amount. Nevertheless, Stacy and Joshua were not going to let unfortunate circumstances prevent them from fulfilling their dream of a large family. In 2014, their second daughter, Willow, was born. Stacy was overjoyed, but she was unable to fully enjoy the happiness of motherhood. After the second birth, her health condition only worsened. She was hospitalized with dangerously low blood pressure and heart rate, spending several days in the intensive care unit. Tests consistently failed to explain why a 28-year-old woman, who had never previously had heart problems and had no family history of heart disease, suddenly found herself in such a critical condition. Stacy's condition worsened so much that in January 2015 she was hospitalized again, and shortly after being admitted, her heart stopped. She was placed on a ventilator to help her breathe, while doctors did everything possible to keep her alive. Because her health had become so unpredictable, the specialists made a decision that shocked everyone, including themselves. They decided to implant a pacemaker to ensure her heart would function more steadily. This was highly unusual. The doctors themselves had never encountered such a young patient needing a pacemaker. Nevertheless, after the procedure, Stacy continued to live, but not as she had before. Where she had once easily run marathons, she now had to be much more careful. Still, she did not lose heart. She devoted herself entirely to her children. Stacy loved making things by hand, and together with her kids, she created beautiful crafts, turning the simplest materials into home decor. It seemed that life had finally settled down, and the sudden hospital visits were behind them, until the night of September 23, 2018. That night, Joshua Hunsucker called emergency services and reported that he had found his 32-year-old wife not breathing, blue, and showing no signs of life. He said he had stepped outside briefly to check that the cars were locked because there had been thieves in the area. When he came back inside, he found his wife slumped over the back of the couch. Emergency responders acted quickly, but this time they could not save Stacy. She was pronounced dead upon arrival at the hospital. Given her 8-year history of heart problems and 3 years living with a pacemaker, the cause of death seemed obvious. It appeared to be a natural, though tragic, end to a long struggle with illness. No further investigation into her death was conducted. Stacy's parents, Susie and John Robinson, tried to come to terms with their loss. They couldn't stop thinking about whether they could have done something more to help her. As they repeatedly discussed Stacy's final day with Joshua, Susie began noticing small inconsistencies. Joshua told his mother-in-law that he had been working on his laptop at the kitchen table that evening and only realized something was wrong when he turned around and saw his wife lying strangely on the couch. Yet to doctors, he had told a story about car thieves. To one friend, he said he found Stacy after returning from a walk. To another, after being outside cutting wood for crafts. Susie was stunned to realize that Joshua had given 4 different versions of the same event. While people react differently to trauma, when someone tells the truth about such a shocking moment, the details usually remain consistent. They become etched in memory. These discrepancies raised concerns, but what truly alarmed her was his behavior in the days that followed. After Stacy's death, her husband categorically refused an autopsy. This was unusual for at least 2 reasons. First, as a loving husband, one would expect him to want to know the cause of his wife's premature death. Second, and more importantly, as a medical professional, he surely understood that the condition could have been hereditary and might affect one or both of his daughters in the future. Nevertheless, he ignored both logic and even Stacy's own wishes, as she had been an organ donor. Joshua said he did not want her cut open and had her body cremated within 2 days of her death. If he truly believed she had died of natural causes, a quick cremation might not seem suspicious. What was more striking was something else. Within those same 48 hours, Joshua filed for 2 life insurance payouts totaling $250,000. After receiving the money, he behaved nothing like a grieving widower. He paid off the mortgage, bought a $100,000 boat, and went on vacation with a new girlfriend he had apparently begun seeing before his wife's death. Within 6 months, he was living with her and the children in the same house he had once shared with Stacy. Even his colleagues at the medical center were surprised. They had never seen him grieving. It seemed as though his wife's death had not saddened him, but instead allowed him to begin a new, happier life. While it's true that people grieve differently, and it's hard to judge someone's inner feelings, one person could not shake the sense that something was wrong. Stacy's mother, Suzanne Robinson, had spent years helplessly watching her daughter suffer, and now she was gone. At first, she blamed no one, but over time, she began piecing together details she had previously overlooked. Together, they seemed too suspicious to ignore. If the thought had never crossed her mind before, Joshua's actions made her wonder. Had her son-in-law killed her daughter for insurance money and freedom from marriage? The idea would not leave her. Suzanne decided she would not let a potential murder go unpunished. By May 2019, 9 months after her daughter's death, her determination had reached its peak. She contacted the North Carolina Department of Insurance and filed a complaint accusing her son-in-law of insurance fraud. It was a strategic move. The police might have ignored her suspicions, but an insurance company would not pass up the opportunity to investigate. Her decision triggered an inquiry that would ultimately rewrite the story of how Stacy really died. It was as if fate itself intervened in the investigation. Because Stacy Hunsucker had been an organ donor, and organ retrieval requires quick action, doctors managed to take a blood sample before her husband intervened. Her body had long since been cremated, but that vial of blood remained. Investigators sent it to a laboratory, but to their surprise, the initial toxicology report showed nothing. Still, they did not give up. They requested an expanded toxicology screening, including substances not typically listed among standard poisons and toxins. That decision changed everything. The lab results revealed an extremely high level of tetrahydrozoline, a compound commonly found in ordinary nasal sprays and eye drops. The concentration in Stacy's body at the time of her death was 30 to 40 times higher than the therapeutic level. At first glance, eye drops seem harmless. No prescription required. Could they really be used to poison someone? If you recall the movie Wedding Crashers, where eye drops mixed into a drink caused diarrhea, that memory would actually mislead you. A far more accurate depiction of their danger was given by Agatha Christie in her novels, one of which features a family patriarch murdered after his medicine was replaced with eye drops. Having worked as a pharmacist, she understood well how dangerous they could be. When used as intended, these products are relatively safe, but if swallowed, their harmful effects on the heart and blood pressure become apparent. Symptoms include difficulty breathing, nausea, a drop in blood pressure, and irregular heart rhythms, either too fast or too slow. In cases of severe overdose, a person can fall into a coma. The most insidious aspect is that these symptoms closely mimic genuine medical conditions, very similar to what Stacy experienced after the birth of her first daughter, before her condition worsened over time. Investigators concluded that Stacy had been poisoned. Someone had been secretly adding eye drops to her drinks over a prolonged period. The only person who could have done this without raising suspicion was her husband, Joshua Hunsucker. As a medical professional, he would have understood the properties of such substances. Moreover, detectives later discovered that Joshua had once made a chilling statement to colleagues. If he ever wanted to kill someone, he would use ordinary eye drops. Police and Stacy's relatives believed that Joshua may have drawn inspiration from a similar case that had received widespread media coverage. Just weeks before Stacy's death, a nurse from South Carolina, Lana Sue Clayton, was arrested for murdering her husband. The crime nearly went undetected because her millionaire husband strongly opposed traditional medicine and had never even had his blood tested. A toxicology report, requested by the victim's nephew, revealed high levels of tetrahydrozoline in his body, the same substance found in Stacy. Lana claimed she had not intended to kill her husband, but only to cause diarrhea after watching movies. However, police and prosecutors did not believe her. Stacy died on September 23rd, about a month after that case. But while Lana poisoned her husband over just 3 days, leading to a rapid death, Joshua appears to have acted more carefully, poisoning his wife gradually over time. It is nearly impossible to determine exactly when he began affecting her health, but it is quite possible that he was not merely imitating Lana. He may have independently conceived the method. In any case, like Lana, Joshua was arrested in December 2019, a year after Stacy's death. He was charged with first-degree murder, insurance fraud, and obtaining property by deception. But this was not the end of the disturbing story. In fact, the most shocking part was yet to come. Despite the charges, Joshua was released, and what he did next left everyone horrified. But before that, he added yet another charge to the already long list of crimes he was suspected of. In November 2019, while the investigation into Stacy Hunsucker's death was still ongoing, and Joshua Hunsucker had not yet been arrested, something came over him. He set fire to a syringe pump aboard the medical helicopter he worked on, and he did it mid-flight. The pilot made an emergency landing in the parking lot of a car dealership, and fortunately, no one was injured. It quickly became clear that the fire had not been accidental and that Joshua had staged it. However, investigators were never able to determine his motive. Did he intend to kill the entire crew, including himself, or did he hope to appear as a hero by saving everyone? Or perhaps he planned to file a lawsuit against the medical center where he worked. Given his apparent familiarity with insurance fraud, that possibility seems plausible. It's also hard not to connect this incident with the earlier house fire that destroyed the family's belongings. Was Joshua a pyromaniac, or did he always have a calculated goal? In any case, he was fired from the medical center, and police charged him with arson. Despite the growing list of accusations, he was allowed to post bail and remain free until trial. His lawyer requested bail set at $50,000, arguing that Joshua had no prior criminal record and needed to care for his children. Instead, the judge set bail at $1.5 million. 5 days later, on Christmas Eve 2019, Joshua was released from jail. You might wonder, why would he kill his wife for $250,000 if he could raise $1.5 million in just 5 days? The answer is more nuanced. In the United States, there are bail bond companies that essentially provide defendants with a loan for freedom. When the trial begins and bail is returned, these companies take a fee, usually around 10% of the total bail. If the defendant fails to appear in court, bounty hunters are sent after them. In Joshua's case, it was even simpler. He only needed to pay 10% of the total amount to be released. The condition was that he wear a GPS tracker and remain at home during curfew hours. After his release, Joshua had an opportunity to lie low and demonstrate good behavior. Instead, he chose a different path. He seemed to believe that drawing attention away from himself meant shifting suspicion onto Stacy's parents, Suzanne Robinson and John Robinson. He began stalking and intimidating them, blocking their car when they tried to park at church, making obscene gestures, and even photographing them during their granddaughter's lacrosse practices. He didn't seem bothered that his own young daughters witnessed these incidents. But even this wasn't enough for him. In February 2023, Joshua called the police with a shocking claim. He had been kidnapped. He said he had stopped on the road to fix a flat tire when he was attacked, beaten with a gun, restrained with zip ties, and injected with unknown substances. Police later found him in the woods not far from where his car was parked. Most strikingly, Joshua identified his attacker as his former father-in-law, John Robinson. Authorities took the allegation seriously, but after investigating, they found no evidence to support his story. They concluded that Joshua had staged his own kidnapping in an attempt to shift suspicion for Stacy's death onto her parents. If anything, this only made his legal situation worse. Even that was not the end. With no job, Joshua had plenty of time to devise further schemes. Just weeks after the staged kidnapping, his eldest daughter, Piper, suddenly became seriously ill. She was rushed to the hospital with symptoms that alarmed doctors: low blood pressure, low heart rate, drowsiness, fatigue, constricted blood vessels, and temporary loss of consciousness, the same symptoms her mother had suffered for years. Doctors were baffled, until Joshua himself suggested that his daughter might have been poisoned with eye drops. It appeared he was again trying to cast suspicion on Stacy's parents. However, investigators reached a different conclusion. Tests confirmed the presence of tetrahydrozoline in the girl's system, along with an antidepressant prescribed only to adults. Police had previously found a tablet of that same antidepressant, not with Suzanne and John, but in Joshua's own car during the kidnapping investigation. His attempt to control the narrative collapsed when investigators concluded that he had poisoned his own daughter to frame Stacy's parents and remove them from the children's lives. He was soon arrested on new charges, and this time the court took no chances. He was held in custody awaiting trial. As of now, the case is still pending, and Joshua is legally presumed innocent until proven guilty. Custody of the girls was granted to Joshua's sister, but their grandparents, John and Susie, are fighting to bring them home. Stacy's parents made a public statement, promising their daughter that they would seek justice and care for her children. "Stacy, your mom and dad, promise that we will not rest until justice is served. We will do everything in our power to support and care for your wonderful daughters. We will love them as we loved, and still love, you. We will never let your children forget what an amazing mother you truly were. Your spirit and your smile live on through them every single day." Truth can sometimes be stranger than fiction. In a short span of time, one man allegedly poisoned his wife, attempted to frame her parents, set a fire mid-flight, staged a kidnapping, and even harmed his own child, all to avoid responsibility. As the case moves toward trial, one question remains. If not for a mother's instinct and a single preserved vial of blood, how long could the killer have remained in the shadows?